This is Chem 341, Physical Chemistry for the Life Sciences. It's the terminal class for students who are getting, one of the terminal classes for students who are getting a chemistry minor. It's a smallish class, 15, 20 students. This past semester I had 15. A lot of discussion, use a lot of literature, talk about techniques, so really kind of a capstone overview of their whole chemistry education. So with that in mind, I was thinking about alternatives to the traditional final exam, and I wanted to do something where they were going to synthesize all of the stuff they'd learned, and I came up with this idea of doing an infographic. Pick a topic that they want to distill down, make it accessible, make it visual, make it engaging. I wanted to leave it open to them, partly because I thought that would stimulate creativity, but also because I wasn't quite sure what I was expecting out of the assignment. So there are a lot of iterations of how do we approach design, how do we approach interpreting infographics, how do we approach designing them, what's appropriate for an infographic, what's not. And in the end, they produce these, some interactive, some static representations of concepts that we discussed in class. Well, first of all, I was thinking we could have a gallery, sort of a place where we could all gather and look at each other's infographics, and they would look appealing, they would be engaging. We could say, oh, you talked about entropy in such a pictorial, beautiful way, as opposed to just a bunch of equations, which I'd been writing out during the semester. So that's just one example of, I liked the aesthetic idea of it. I've also been thinking about, what will students take away from this class? And a lot of students have said they've liked this class that I've taught before, but after some time, weeks, months, maybe even hours, they've lost a significant amount of the course material. And so designing something that they have ownership in, that they've invested time into one narrow project, I thought would at least give them something that they can hold on to. Even if they don't remember all the details of thermodynamics, they might still have some idea of what's a path function. When I was designing the syllabus, I knew we were going to have to take some time to look at other infographics and get a sense of what's out there, what do we like, what don't we like. And Adam said, here's something you could consider: collectively design your rubric for grading. And when he explained it to me, I thought, this is exactly what I want to do. I can retain some control over, I'm going to be very, not in charge. I'm going to look at the content rigorously, and that's going to be half of the infographic. But then let's decide together where the other half of the points are going to come from. And I think the class decided it was going to have an aspect of how images are used, how text was used, how the overall layout was designed, and then they included a part for creativity. And one of the things I really liked about that is I felt like the pressure was taken off of me to be, in terms of grading in this visual realm where that's not my expertise. I'm good at grading exams with questions with fixed answers, but I didn't want it to become oh, I liked this one more than this one, so you get the A and you get the B. And so having that rubric that we decided on collectively midway through the semester, everyone had access to it throughout the entire production and process of their infographics. I think that it made me feel a lot better, and I think the students had a clearer idea of their expectations. I wanted it to be open this past go around. I'm not sure I'd be as open if I did it in the future, but this past time I said I want it to be a visual depiction of what you're trying to convey, and you can choose your format. So I suggested they could make a traditional static image infographic, which many students did. Either they used online templates or they built it up in PowerPoint or something. Some students wanted to make something a little more interactive, so using Microsoft Sway or even little mini PowerPoint presentations that were just a few slides, image A, image B, string it together with some text and give a little bit of flow. A couple of students opted to do more complex presentations, so I gave them the option to choose what medium and how interactive or how guided of a project it would be. So I had one student that made a very technical infographic describing prion proteins and how the misfolded protein is the thermodynamically stable product, and the biologically active protein is the kinetically favored product, and contrasting the difference between the thermodynamics and the kinetics in that sense and why it has some consequences biologically. That was a very rigorous scientific infographic. It wasn't as beautiful, but it conveyed a lot of information. I had another student who did an overview of electron microscopy, which won the Nobel Prize that I guess last fall. And they were just walking through the basic steps of this is the machine you would buy, this is how you would freeze your samples, this is how you, in a very hand-wavy, no equations sense, this is how you would reconstruct the images. And then I had some students, one student in particular did an infographic about, it was a sway presentation about why popcorn pops, talking about the pressure building up and how it expands. So they all targeted different audiences, and I asked the students to specify what was the audience they were intending to send the infographic to. And I think they all, for the most part, did a pretty good job targeting those audiences. When we turn it into the final assignment, I said, part of your infographic, you're going to turn in a separate one-page explanation that includes who your audience is, but then you'll be graded on, do you match your infographic to the audience you said you're targeting? I felt like I was engaging with the students' comprehension of the material in a different way than when I do regular exams. Having them produce something, I felt like I understood the students' interest, level of understanding, ability to communicate differently. And that was at least interesting, and I think also helpful when it came down to assigning final grades. I liked the grading of it. It was a much more pleasurable experience than grading a stack of final exams at the end of the semester. And I think partly because it was this engaging with the students as well. There are certainly classes for which I would think this is a totally inappropriate assignment. But for this particular class, I feel like it's a nice way to encapsulate a lot of what they've learned through a lot of chemistry classes and put it all together.